What's up, YouTube family? My name is Dustin Benedict, and today I want to talk about cameras. So the reason I titled this video, "Watch This Before You Buy the Canon EOS RP," is because tomorrow is Thanksgiving. So happy Thanksgiving to everybody that's out there. I hope you take some time to really think about what you're thankful for and the amazing things that you have in your life. But with Thanksgiving comes Black Friday. So I know that everybody out there is just itching to hit those Black Friday deals, get the best deals that you can possibly get. And I honestly, strongly feel that this camera, the Canon EOS RP, is one of the best deals that's out there for Black Friday. But that being said, this camera isn't for everybody. So the last thing I want you to do is go out and spend your hard-earned money that you have earned on something that doesn't fit your needs as a photographer or a videographer or an online video content creator. So that being said, I wanted to go over some of the pros and the cons that I see with the Canon EOS RP. That way you can go out, make an educated purchase, or decide that this camera really isn't for me. So I'm going to start with pros. Now these are in no particular order, so it's not like number one is the best thing about this camera. I just made a list, pros and cons. So number one, the autofocus. So this camera has Canon's dual pixel autofocus. Guys, there are a million videos out there, and I will actually do a video here pretty soon because they just did the firmware update that gives this better eye detect autofocus. So go out, do some research, but Canon is known for their dual pixel autofocus. It just works. Regardless, it always works. So that's something if you're making videos or if you're doing photography, you need an autofocus system that works every time. So the second thing is focus peaking. So if you don't know what focus peaking is, basically whenever you are in manual focus on this camera, you can set up focus peaking, and when you're trying to pull focus on the lens here, wherever your focus is will light up in either blue, green, or red, whichever color you decide, but it will actually illuminate that area on the screen so you can see and make sure that whatever you're trying to focus on is in focus. That is great in 4K on this camera, and we'll go over the reasons why in a little bit. That kind of falls into the cons, but focus peaking really helps in this situation. The next thing is the price. This camera right now is under $1,000. So for $999 you get the camera body. You can buy the kit lens with it if you want. That's going to put you up around $1,800, but that 24 to 105 f4 L lens is a phenomenal lens. I just bought the actual body because I have some older Canon glass that I use the EF to RF adapter and adapt my older glass to it. So price, you're not going to beat it. You're just not. You're not going to be able to get into a brand new full frame mirrorless camera for under $1,000 anywhere else, unless you go with a Sony a7 II. That camera's 5 years old. So if you're already in the Sony ecosystem, maybe the a7 II is the camera for you. I'm not saying that this is the best camera that's out there. I'm just saying that this is the camera that fit my needs. You should really check and see if it fits yours. So the next thing is the sensor. It's a 26.2 megapixel full frame sensor. Basically the same sensor that was out of the 6D Mark II. So if you're in an APS-C sensor right now, a Canon APS-C, Nikon, whatever system you're in, and you really want to go to full frame, really if you're in Canon and you're trying to go to full frame, maybe you have some full frame lenses, this would be a great jump for you right here, the Canon EOS RP. Now if you're in a crop sensor or an APS-C censored camera that's in Canon, just beware that going to a full frame sensor like this, that EFS glass is not going to work on this camera. You can take pictures with it for photography, but it's going to look like you're taking a picture through a tunnel. So there's going to be some serious vignetting there. So that is something to think about as well. So the next pro is 4K. This camera will shoot 4K 24 frames per second. It does have a 1.6 times crop. So that kind of falls on the cons, but it does shoot 4K. So if you absolutely have to have 4K, this camera does shoot 4K. We're going to talk a little bit more about the 4K when we get to the cons. So, but anyways, next thing is 24 frames per second in full HD. 2019, almost in 2020. You wouldn't think that that's something we would have to talk about, but it is. They just did the firmware 1.4 update, and now this camera does shoot 24 frames in full HD. I don't know why that was ever taken out. I talked about that in the previous video, but that's fixed. So that is a positive, 24 frames per second in full HD. Last one I have on here, and there are other ones, other pros and good things to this. I'm trying to keep the length of this video short, but is lens selection. So with this camera, because you have the EF to RF adapter, you can use pretty much the full lineup of all the EF glass that Canon has out there. And Canon has been producing EF lenses for a long time. Not only that, they have the RF lenses. And that kind of seems to be the bread and butter right now for Canon, is their lenses. They're putting a lot of time, effort, and money into their RF lenses. And I really feel like that's the future of Canon. Those lenses and the R series cameras, the mirrorless series cameras. So if you can afford it, those RF glass, those lenses are amazing. If not, and you need to keep things on the cheaper side, buy some older used Canon lenses, some EF lenses, and use the RF adapter and adapt those to this camera, and you're gonna get killer results. I can't talk about lenses enough. Lenses are so important. So get you some good lenses. That's kind of the benefit to getting a cheaper body that is still good. You can afford to be able to kind of spend a little bit more money if you have the budget on better glass. So those are the pros that I have. Now let's talk about the cons. So the bad things about this camera. The first thing is the 4K. So the rolling shutter, which for anybody that's not familiar with that, is when you're shooting in 4K and you move the camera like this, it looks like Jello. It's just wobbly Jello. And I actually have it written down on my list as 4K Jello. That's how bad it is. The only time I shoot 4K, that I have shot 4K with this camera, is when I'm on a tripod doing something like this, a talking head segment or something like that. But it does crop in 1.6 times, so it does shoot 4K. Also, another con is you lose dual pixel autofocus in 4K. But remember how we talked about focus peaking? That's where this kind of comes in handy. Use that focus peaking, set your camera up on a tripod, make sure that you are in focus, and you're done. Set it. So I do think, as somebody who does videography, it's important to know how to do manual focus. Autofocus is great, but manual focus, you need to know how to do it as well. So this kind of, it helps in that aspect, but it is a con. The next thing I have is the battery life. So this Canon camera uses the LPE 17 battery. It's rated for 250 shots. Really, depending upon how you use it, I'm seeing anywhere from 400 to 600 shots. So that's a con. Most people, that's going to be fine. Your average person that's getting into cameras, shooting the family, shooting the kids, shooting sporting events, things like that, that's going to be fine. Not a bad idea to invest in a couple of extra batteries, but that's the case with any camera that you have. Carry some extra batteries in your bag and keep them with you. Next thing is the EFS lenses. I briefly talked about this in the pros, the lens selection. EFS lenses, those are crop censored lenses. So lenses that are built for crop censored cameras. They're the cheaper lenses because they're built for crop censored cameras. They will not work if you are recording video on this. They will only work in 4K, and they will only work in 720p. You do not get full HD on this camera with an EFS lens. I wish it wasn't that way. Other brands like Nikon has it figured out. Whenever you put an EFS or a DX lens, that's Nikon's crop sensor lenses, on one of their full frame bodies, it automatically figures it out and crops in. I don't know why Canon doesn't do that. It's 2019. You think that they would have figured that out by now, but it is what it is. But if you're using 4K on a tripod, and say you have a 10 to 18 millimeter lens, you now have a 4K 16 millimeter lens shooting in 4K. Would be perfect for the talking head stuff that we're talking about like right now. So inside the studio, something like that, that lens would work great. So that's also something to think about. If you own a bunch of EFS glass, maybe the Canon 90D, that would be, or the, yeah, probably the Canon 90D. I was gonna say the 6D Mark II, but it has it's an EFM, so different, you'd have to buy an adapter to adapt that glass to it. So no 120 frames per second. I've always used 60 frames per second because I had the 80D before this camera, so I'm used to 60 frames per second. Canon, their true 120 frames per second, they're putting that in their higher end bodies, the 1DX Mark II. Even in the 90D that just came out, there's some issues with the autofocus in 120 frames per second. I like 60 frames per second. I don't have any issues with it. If you need slow-mo, it will suffice. But that's another con. And the last thing I have on my list here is the no dual pixel autofocus in 4K, but we already kind of touched on that earlier. It goes to a contrast detect autofocus. Does work. It's really slow, kind of janky. But like I said, use focus peaking, pull your focus, use manual focus. It was here long before autofocus. If you really have to use 4K in this camera. The 1080p that comes out of this camera is beautiful. It's great. I have not had any issues with it yet. So if you have to have 4K, use that. If not, you have to have 4K with a good autofocus system, this might not be the camera for you. There are tons of other cameras out there on the market. Just finding another full frame camera at this price, brand new, not gonna happen. There are a lot of other cameras in the market at this price that compete with this, but a lot of them are crop censored mirrorless cameras. The Fuji X-T3, the A6600, those are right around the same price range as this camera. Both are crop censored cameras. They pack some extra features that this camera doesn't, but if you really want to be into full frame, I really feel like this is the best camera. This is the most bang for your buck camera that's out there on the market right now. Now, after Black Friday, I don't know what the price is going to be on this camera. I don't know if it's going to go back to $1,300 for the body and back to over $2,000 for it in the kit lens. I have no idea. I kind of feel like it's going to. So if you're looking to buy this camera on Black Friday, really do your research. Get out there, look at some other cameras, go somewhere where you can put your hands on this camera. Best Buy has this camera in the adapter on sale for $9.99. You can go to the store, go to a local camera store somewhere, grab a hold of this thing, play with it for as long as you can, and figure out if this is the best camera for you. So if you're new to this channel and you've got something from this video, please, if you'd like to subscribe, hit that thumbs up. It does help out a lot. Turn on the bell notification so that way you'll get notified. I'm starting to do a video every week, so that way I have content coming out every week. I do a lot of camera talk. It's kind of what I do. I love cameras and everything about cameras. I'm going to start getting into some more tutorials about this, how to use it. I kind of want to do a video specifically for photography and a video specifically for videography, because I feel like there's a lot of videographers that kind of get left out, because everybody talks about how many frames per second it shoots, all the photography side of it, and then they just give you a slice of the videography side there. So I want to do one of each. But that's it for today. That's all I've got. Don't forget, be thankful for everything that you have. Tell the people that you love, that you thank them for being who they are. Happy Thanksgiving to everybody, and I